For nearly 2,000 years, the name Judas Iscariot has been a symbol of betrayal. The man who handed Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver. The disciple who turned against his teacher. The villain of the Passion narrative. His name became so infamous that it left the world of history and entered the world of language itself. Judas, meaning traitor, betrayer, false friend. But what if the story billions of people inherited is only one version? What if another story, older than many ever imagined, survived in fragments buried beneath the sands of Egypt? A story describing Judas not as the betrayer, but as the only disciple who actually understood Jesus. In 2006, a fragile manuscript, held together by chance and desperation, re-entered history. Before restoration, it was nothing more than a decaying bundle of papyrus pages, rotting in a safe deposit box. No one knew what it contained. No one suspected its value. But when conservation teams slowly separated the pages and began reading the faded Coptic text, everything changed. They weren't looking at the Gospels we know, not the familiar accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. They were looking at a text so controversial that early Christian authorities attempted to erase it from existence. Text titled simply, The Gospel of Judas. And in its pages, the most hated disciple of all time speaks, not as a villain, not as a traitor, but as the only one Jesus trusted with his secret. This version of the story didn't survive in churches. It survived because someone hid it. Someone buried it. Someone wanted it to remain unseen until a time when its contents could no longer threaten the foundation of the early church. The Gospel of Judas wasn't discovered in a monastery or an archive. It emerged from the black market world of antiquities smuggling in the 1970s. A group of scavengers stumbled upon a sealed box in a cave near Minya, Egypt. Inside it was a leather-bound codex, brittle, dark, and half-eaten by insects. They didn't preserve it. They didn't treat it as sacred. They treated it as merchandise. It was sold, stolen, passed from hand to hand. At one point, someone stored it in a freezer, thinking it was the safest place to keep it. At another point, someone forgot it in a safety deposit box where humidity almost destroyed it. By the time scholars retrieved it decades later, the manuscript was on the edge of disintegration. Many pages had turned to powder. Others crumbled when touched. But enough survived to reveal a text that contradicted almost everything the world thought it knew about Judas Iscariot. In the traditional story, Judas is driven by greed. He sells Jesus for money. He regrets it too late. He dies in despair. His story is simple because simplicity serves the narrative. One traitor among 12, a cautionary example, a figure for moral lessons. But the Gospel of Judas flips this completely. In this suppressed version, Judas is not driven by greed at all. He is approached privately by Jesus, singled out, chosen, entrusted with knowledge the other disciples never receive. This gospel opens not with betrayal, but with separation. Jesus laughs at the misunderstandings of the other disciples. They cling to rituals, sacrifices, and earthly interpretations. They ask questions but fail to grasp the meaning behind his words. They're focused on the visible world, the physical one, the one shaped by rules and customs. But Jesus, in this text, is trying to show them something beyond that, the realm of the divine, the invisible universe of spiritual truth. And only one disciple is capable of understanding what he means, Judas. This is where the narrative diverges sharply from anything found in the canon. Jesus and Judas have a private, secret dialogue, conversations hidden from the others. According to this gospel, Judas is the only disciple who sees Jesus not merely as a teacher or prophet, but as a being from a higher, divine realm. The others grasp fragments, pieces, symbols. Judas sees the whole. Jesus tells him something shocking: "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." What does that mean? Some scholars interpret the phrase, "the man that clothes me," as Jesus referring to his physical body, the human vessel. In this view, Judas's role is not betrayal, but liberation. He is the one who must initiate the separation of Jesus from his mortal form. Not because Judas hates him, but because Judas is the only one strong enough, or obedient enough, to carry out the act that leads to the crucifixion. And in this version, the crucifixion is not a tragedy. It is a necessary process, a release from the physical world into the divine one. Judas, then, is not the villain. He is the instrument of transition, the one who enables Jesus to return to his true realm. This interpretation shocked scholars because it reframed everything. Judas wasn't the weakest disciple. He was the strongest. He wasn't the betrayer. He was the chosen one. And this would have been completely unacceptable to the early church, a narrative too disruptive, too destabilizing to be allowed into the official canon. The Gospel of Judas reflects the worldview of the Gnostics, a movement within early Christianity that believed salvation came from knowledge, from understanding the deeper structure of the divine. They believed the physical world was a prison created by a lesser deity, a flawed being. In their cosmology, Jesus descends from a higher divine source, bringing knowledge to free humanity from the material realm. And Judas, in this perspective, is not the enemy of salvation but a facilitator of it. This explains why the early church condemned the text. Gnosticism directly challenged the authority of church leaders. It implied that understanding, not obedience, led to salvation. It suggested that spiritual truth was internal, not controlled by institutions. It argued that Jesus's true teachings were reserved for a few, not the public. And Judas, in this story, becomes the ultimate outsider, the one chosen for a role no one else could bear, a role guaranteed to make him hated for generations. One of the most haunting parts of the Gospel of Judas is Jesus's warning. He tells Judas that although he will perform the necessary act, he will be misunderstood forever. He will be cursed. His name will be reviled. He will carry the burden of history. This version doesn't portray Judas as joyful or proud. He is troubled. He is conflicted. He knows what must happen, but he also knows the world will never see his intention. Imagine being told that your destiny is to do something essential, but that every generation after you will interpret it as betrayal, that your name will become synonymous with treachery, that the act you perform in obedience will be remembered as the greatest act of betrayal in human history. Whether one sees this text as symbolic or literal, the psychological dimension is striking. Judas becomes a tragic figure, not weak, not greedy, but isolated by knowledge. He sees what the others cannot. And because he sees more, he suffers more. Scholars today debate whether the Gospel of Judas reflects any historical reality. But its existence proves something undeniable. Early Christianity was not unified. It was diverse, fragmented, filled with competing interpretations. And the version that survived did so because it gained institutional power, not because it was the only version ever written. The Gospel of Judas survived by accident. It was not meant to. It was buried, hidden, forgotten. But it raises questions that shake the foundation of the familiar story. Was Judas actually the traitor history claims? Or was he a necessary participant? Did he do what he did out of greed or obedience? Maybe the truth is lost. Maybe the truth is more complex. Maybe there was never one truth, only perspectives that competed until one became dominant. But the rediscovery of this forbidden text reminds us that history is written by those who preserve their version longest. And sometimes, a single manuscript, pulled from decay, is enough to show us that the past might be far more complicated, far more layered, and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. If you know someone who loves stories that challenge the official version of history, consider sharing this with them. Thanks for watching, and until the next episode.